Okay, welcome back to Help with Henry. This is the YouTube channel where we offer constructive life advice to people that are struggling. And today's topic is how to get past a traumatic event. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I think that there is a lot of people walking around and they are holding trauma or something has happened to them which they're holding tightly and it hinders their growth moving forward. A good example of, trauma can come in so many ways, shapes, and forms, but a good, example of this would be if you had, for example, been in a car crash and you were having to drive back on the road again. For one person, might go through a car crash and they'll be absolutely fine and they'll be straight back in the car the minute they've got one again. And then the other person will never get in a car and will never drive again because it was so impactful on them. So obviously, this is very personal. There could be some sort of abuse of some form, an abusive relationship. That's very traumatic. So someone that comes out of that might never want to get into a relationship again because they're holding trauma from that relationship, which could cause them not to want to ever date again or to be lonely. Which you see my point. People go through all sorts of trauma, and without labeling it too much, I don't think it serves people to label themselves like I am an ex car crash person, therefore I don't drive. Because you're putting this huge mental block in your mind by saying that. The best thing to do is to recognize the trauma to begin with. And I really want to discuss a few points and to stay on track and to make sure I get my points across. I've written them down here and we'll talk through these in sort of an orderly fashion because I think they'll be beneficial for you to be able to let go of your trauma or to think about some ways to go about managing it, dealing with it, coping with it. So let's start. Um, I think number one, your trauma does not define you. So this is quite a nice segue from going from talking about people that have been in a car crash and no longer drive anymore, even though that's not everyone who goes through that will never drive again, or not everyone who goes through that will be a nervous driver for the rest of their time. But for the people that are traumatized by it, and there's no shame in that, um you've got to understand that it doesn't define you. Like if you could be beating yourself up about making a mistake or having poor judgment, or you could have victimized yourself as someone that can never drive again, or you can have that label in your mind where um you're all of a sudden defined as this person. But let's establish that if something has happened to you, that doesn't define you. It's not who you are. Because sometimes big traumatic events can have such an impact on you that it creates such a strong, solid imprint on your mind that you're almost defined by it and you almost live by that. So let's let go of defining ourselves as someone that this has happened to and start working on getting through the trauma and looking into it and dealing with it rather than defining yourself as someone who has gone through X. Because if you imagine your life as a scope, if you're looking at it from a defined point of view, you're always going to act in alignment with that. And even though that might be comforting as a way to deal with it, that isn't actually going to help you grow within your life. So that's the first one. Recognize the fact that the trauma does not define you. It's a nice segue again. So think objectively about what's happened to you. So in traumatic situations, you can like analyze them, and you can to the nth degree, and you can work with the facts. So think about what's happened to you, and it's not necessarily always good to think why it's happened to you, because then you can end up saying why me, when actually it's more like this is what's happened, and I'm going to lay the facts out. I have hit, I have been in this accident, or I have been in this relationship. And then don't let your personal power leave you. Let it, you don't want to be defined. You don't want to be thinking, over analyzing it. You just need to know, you need to think objectively and be like, this is what I know to be the truth. This is what the facts of this situation is, and how objectively am I going to move forward and learn, and that might be, what are my coping mechanisms? What things can I add into my week to make sure that I can manage this? How will I make the first baby step to to getting back in a car again? And obviously we're using this car example a lot, but this could be anything. I've been in an abusive relationship, so um what's the first objective thing I can do to help me get into a supportive relationship? How in the future can I recognize the signs of what the initial signs were? How can I make sure that I'm truly upfront and honest to begin with, to make sure that, or how can I avoid getting back into, rather than saying, I'm never going to do that again, I'm never going to get in a car again, I'm never going to get into a relationship again? Why don't you go, how can I think about the best, safest way of getting into my next relationship, or getting behind that wheel again? Is there an advanced driving course I can go on? Um, is there a very quiet road where I can get back behind the wheel? Is there a safer car that you need to buy? Is there a you need to start thinking objectively about, one, this is what's happened, and it doesn't define me. This doesn't define me as the driver who never drove again. And number two, you need to think about the coping mechanisms, the way you can prevent it from happening again, and what's going to trigger you. Because sometimes trauma is a weird thing. You could be having panic attacks when getting behind the wheel again. You could be having severe trust issues getting into a relationship again. You could be paranoid in the future. And you've got to learn, number one, that it doesn't define you, and number two, that the only person that can truly help you is yourself to getting out of it. Your own um, attitude and preventive measures, and your own esteem is what's going to get you out of it, and get you moving forward. But let's not go too off topic. um and this is it as well, you like recognizing facts. I think that's so important, because um fact of the matter is, okay, this has happened once, or this has happened twice. Why has this happened? How can I avoid it happening again? And then not like adding to the story of it, because what what we tend to do is, something might have happened, and then we build this story around what's happened, and we make it into an even bigger thing, and we make it into an even more traumatic thing, and we wind ourselves up about something, and we wind and we add to this big story, to where the point of the original, the original traumatic event that's happened, you've gone from, this is what's happened and the factual truth. And obviously there is immense pain, and there's immense things that go into that, but then at the same time, it's our choice how we have to, um not, or it's our responsibility not to add to the story, because humans are so good at going, you know snowballing stories, building a big story around what's happened, is what we're better off doing, to be able to. And if you want to remain in a traumatized state, then that's okay. But if you're one of the few that wants to grow, that wants to get past, that wants to rebuild, that wants to, re-strengthen yourself, then deal with the facts. Lay it out objectively, deal with the facts, and don't add to the story. Because if you add to what's happened, well, that's why I can never drive again because this thing happened, or that's why I can never be in a relationship again because, and then all of a sudden you've gone from I have been in a abusive relationship and I need to work on pre-warning signs, building my trust. You've gone and labeled it with this thing. You've built this story of this thing's happened to you, therefore you're never going there again. So it doesn't need to be like that. You can make it almost harder on yourself than it needs to be. So don't just, or please try and avoid adding to it because number one, you've already been through something traumatic. So you're going to have to work on that, and you're going to have to, and if it's too raw, then it's not time yet. But when it does come to time to work on it and to move forward and to start growing again, you need to go, these are the facts, this is the objective truth. How am I going to prevent it? How am I going to move forward? And start working on that rather than adding to this story, this label to why you can never move forward again. Healing takes time. Okay, so we know it's going to take time. All right, you've got a massive open wound, and see how I said massive then? Do you see that? You've got an open wound, right? And it's going to take time to heal. Time heals everything. What doesn't seem so rosy today will one day be something of the past, and you will work through it. And I have every faith that you give it time, you work on the problem, you attack it from all angles, and the healing will take place. But you got to recognize that, okay, something happened to you last week. You can't expect to be running on all horses by the following month. Do you know what I mean? It's going to take years of commitment to get past something. All right, it's going to take dedicated effort, and just recognizing that, for whatever reason, the human brain goes into shock, and then there's all these people out there living, and there's stuff replaying in the mind every day, stuff that's happened from the past, stuff that traumatized them, etc. The brain takes time to, number one, settle and re-deal with and deal with something, and number two, it just takes time to heal. You need to recognize your wounds, and then it's your choice to when you start working on them. But you can't defeat yourself on the first hurdle. You have to be committed to, like, this is my trauma and I'm going to do everything I can, and it's that person that gets past it. There's people that have overcome incredible odds in this world, and it's up to us to work on that. So yeah, recognize it's going to take time. um, Maintain and build self belief. So just that, and that just comes down to being very caring of yourself ultimately. So instead of like beating yourself up, and instead of replaying it on your mind every day, and instead of re-going over to it, and instead of adding to this story, you know recognize that you've got to maintain it, and maintain that self-belief. And how do I say that? Self-belief is more about being like, this has happened to me and I believe that I'm going to get past it. I believe that there's going to be a time when I can get back in that car again. I believe that I'll be able to drive there. I believe I'll be able to get into another relationship. I believe that I'll be able to get past it, and I'm really believing that and maintaining it. Yeah, so trauma as a whole is, I'm using an open wound as an example, but so many of us replay something that happened like 10 years ago, and or 7 years ago or 5 years ago, and you almost haven't dealt with that thing. And sometimes that means you've got to go back and you've got to, revisit that place where it happened, or re-speak to someone where it all went wrong, or um but the continual like berating of the own mind by replaying thoughts and replaying um the event, and thinking about it when you wake up in the morning, and waking up in the night thinking about what happened. And you don't need to do that. You don't, and sometimes it is not of choice. Okay, someone that's waking up in cold sweats in the night and sees a car, or someone that's, you know, a post-traumatic event has happened, and your overall mindset and your own, um even if that thought comes up, you don't have to listen to it. You just go, okay, that happened, and or whenever it happens, you can say to yourself, but I'm doing something about um it, getting past this, and really trying to just be kind to yourself, to not berate yourself, to not add to it. Do you see? And this is so crucial, just not adding to the trauma, and not it's almost like rubbing salt into the wound, isn't it? Like, if you wanted, think about this, right? If you found someone really traumatized and you wanted them to remain traumatized, what would you do? You'd always wind them up about it. You'd always replay what happened. You'd never let them deal with what's happened. You'd never let them think about how they can avoid it happening again. You'd always like remind them of how bad it was, and how you can never forgive, and how you can never get past it. That's how you'd remain someone traumatized. So if you reverse that and you go, well, you know, this is what has happened. These are the facts. This is the situation. This is how I can objectively assess it. And then you go, these are the things which I can do to work through the trauma. So, we used those examples earlier, and it's just about maintaining that. Um, yeah, I hope that this helps, and I hope that you realize that I'm not saying that your trauma isn't uh, super, super raw, and something which is obviously so powerful to have gone through in your life. I'm just saying that, it's up to us how big we make the story. It's up to us how much we add to this. It's up to us how we cope with it. And you can say, well, yeah, something happened to me 5 years ago. Okay, multiple traumatic events have happened to me, and I am going to do this, 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 and this to not let this overrun my life, or not let this become a label. Um, and then just really proactively think, how can I prevent this happening again? What could I do differently? How can I what how can I focus on what I have control over? So okay, you might not be able to control your thought about it all the time, but you can control your response to it. You can laugh. You can say, I'm still thinking about this. How can I go over this in a reflective way? How can I repair this wound? And just think about, objective, factual things that you can do to help heal yourself, because and you might be thinking, well, why do I need to do all that? And it's like, well, the reason you need to do that is because if you want to move forward in your life, if you want to get past this traumatic event, okay, fine. If you never want to go in a relationship again because it's been an abusive one on the previous one, or you never want to, get back in the car again, and you're happy on a bus for the rest of your life, then fine, don't change anything. But if you do, then it's so important to be able to deal with this, and to work through it, and to think about ways that you can prevent it, and to think about how you can, re-add yourself into that in a safe environment, and not going all guns blazing in like, oh, I'm just gonna get straight back on. Be like, no, this has hurt me, and respect that fact, and this is an open wound, and go, now I know this has hurt me, but I'm not going to let this be my label. I'm not going to let this I don't define the rest of my life. And then just work through it, just do the work, get through it, and then 7 years down the line, you'll be like, damn, I've really got past that. I really cracked it, and you'll be so, so proud of yourself when you do that. And I have every belief in you that you will get past it. So be kind to yourself. Don't replay it. Listen to these bullet points, and do it. I believe in you. Thanks, guys.